Many years ago, I did a video on this channel about the writer Morgan Rice. Now, I felt like those videos have aged badly and they're cringy, so I thought I'd revisit Morgan Rice's work and talk about her, or them, or I'm not entirely sure if it's one person or many. So, I'm William James, I'm the Bald Book Geek. Like, subscribe, and let's start the show. Morgan Rice as a writer is atrocious. A writer that cannot get basic sentence structure, characterization, conversation, and many, many other things right. Let's be honest. And Morgan Rice is also heavily disliked by the indie writing community because she's very much gamed the system. Now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about within this video is theory, because I know nothing about Morgan Rice, but I don't think Morgan Rice is one singular person, and I don't think the photograph that comes up for her is real either. But that is a whole different discussion at this point. So, let's start. Morgan Rice is a writer who tends to capitalize on other series. So, the Vampire Journals is very obviously the Vampire Diaries and Twilight. Realm of the Dragons, very much they're very, very much trying to be Game of Thrones, and so on. The Magic Factory is very Harry Potter-esque. Shadow Seed is very much in the Cassandra Clare family. Where do you want me to start? She tends to jump genre as well, which I find quite interesting. She's done pretty much everything. House of the Dragon is another one that is Rise of the Dragon, I should say, which is very reductive of Game of Thrones. The Arena books very much come from the Hunger Games, and The Way of the Steel very obviously inspired by Assassin's Creed. It's quite interesting to see, and it's one that I always find just fascinating. She's very much gained the system of books, and I also find it interesting with her book covers because I know where these stock photos are coming from, but they're getting more and more AI-ish as it moves on, like the imagery on them. They might not be AI, I'm just saying, in terms of sort of stylistically speaking, they also tend to she's changed the look of certain books as she's moved through the series as well. Now, she is extremely disliked by a lot of the wider indie writing community, and I won't name names, but best-selling writers have a very strong dislike of her, because she seems to have gamed the system in a way that they can't quite understand. And it is true, I see a lot of advertising for Morgan Rice. I see a lot of books, and I see a lot of her in like BookBub lists and all of this stuff. It's endless. But also, just on the writing alone, she is atrocious. She has the inability to write believable characters. All of her characters tend to have very similar or the same voice. Her basic construction of conversation, they're either screaming at each other or yelling at each other, and it's always this high-tension drama moment. Plot beats happen out of nowhere, and a lot of it is just, this randomly happened, I happened to be here. Happenstance is never the best thing for writing, because sometimes that works, and when it's used constantly, though, it ends up becoming this sea of just generic, and it just becomes almost a meme as you read it. You have... She also can't seem to write. Like, there are really simple grammatical errors, and I always forgive errors in indie books because stuff happens. Things slip through editing, and it does happen in mainstream published books as well. Sometimes things do slip through. There might be a double comma or the wrong adjective used or something. But this is a constant thing. Although, in fairness, her books have got better written as they've moved on, it's still very common to have no punctuation, no commas, apostrophes. There's no sign that someone is speaking sometimes, and you do have to read the lines twice. It's really basic stuff that tends to be a constant stream of crap, and it's frustrating. You can definitely see what she's trying to do and how marketing, and kudos to whoever this person actually is. I don't think it's one person, by the way, but kudos to them for doing this, because we all have to make money, we all got to eat, right? But these are just not very good, and I think the fact they do represent some of the worst of the indie scene, and there are some bad books, there are things that are worse, and I will give credit where credit's due. At least some of them are fun, but the basic errors make these very, very difficult to read, and that's a thing that most people don't get. Like, the more errors, it ends up becoming a word soup, and it gets frustrating to read. Books and albums of the audiobooks and things, I feel sorry for the people that have to read them, my god. There's one where one of the characters dies, but then he turns up miraculously with no conversation of why he's there later on. So it's very obvious basic stuff. The reviews on Goodreads and Amazon are extremely shady, to say the least, on the subject, with some. Not all of them, but there are some where you're like, oh. You know, these one accounts where they either only review her work because her fan base is very dedicated, or there are accounts from non-confirmed purchases that have that one review on them. That's always a little bit off. And I think, as a writer, I will say this: read her books of what not to do, because it is what not to do. That's the only way I can describe it. You can read most of the first books in her series for free, and that's it, really. Now, conspiracy theory time. I said this before, I don't think Morgan Rice is a singular person, because the writer's voice and construction changes from book to book, in some cases chapter to chapter, and it's very obvious that these aren't the same person, because you can change your writing style, you can change it up, but there's always a writer's voice, and she does not have that. It's strange. It's very strange. And it never quite, it never feels cohesive. And that's the thing that I find interesting. Like, there's obviously money coming in, she could hire an editor. But I've seen better books written on Fiverr than what she's churning out. And I do get that it's quantity over quality with her work. But it's always this weird enigma. It's kind of up there. It reminds me of My Immortal a little bit, but at least My Immortal was fun, mostly. There is, reading the Turns book, I half expected someone to say thanks for the likes at one point. Morgan Rice is everything that you shouldn't do as a writer, and if you want your work to be taken seriously, maybe read her books and go, okay, this is not what to do. Rush storylines, rush pacing, inconsistent writer's voice, bad characterization, bad character voices, just overall a very poor book. And I mean, there is a lot of stuff on her website where she does obviously does a bit of charity stuff and things like that, which good for her or them. I did look up the picture that's meant to be her, and I don't think it's her. That's a stock photo that's about 20 years old. I don't think that's her. But, you know, it's the internet. Sometimes you get the wrong pictures associated with things. So, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm curious on this one. What do you think of Morgan Rice? Good or bad? I'm here to hear it. Just don't be a jerk. But I'm going to leave this on a note. I feel like Morgan Rice gives a lot of indie writers a really bad name. And that's being honest. She gives a lot of indie writers a really bad name. And she shouldn't, because there are some phenomenal writers in the indie scene that are blowing traditionally published fiction out the water. And then you have Morgan Rice, who is selling bucket loads of poorly edited, poorly written first drafts that are derivative of other people's work. So, tell me what you think, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.